Thanks so much, Robert Greene, for your time today. We're so excited. We're just telling you how you're our number one author. We've read over 300 books, and 3 of yours are in our top 10, and Laws of Human Nature is our number one. So absolutely stoked. And if I just say the one effect we've had, it's sort of represented at the start of your book, your new book, The Daily Laws, and you say, consider the daily laws as a kind of, and I'll butcher this word, but Bildungsroman. In these stories, the protagonists are quite young and full of naive notions.
Bad.
I'll
That's
take
really
it.
unusual.
Slowly, the author lets the reader shed themselves and their various illusions, and the real world educates them, and you emerge enlightened, battle-tested, and wise beyond their years. Wouldn't quite consider ourselves enlightened yet, but we're on the way, and definitely a lot less naive. So has this been one of your goals as a writer, to just sort of bring a sense of reality and to all the readers that you write for?
I think so. I can largely base it on my own experience. When I emerged from university, like a lot of young people, I was full of all kinds of notions, ideals, etc. And then you enter the work world and you see that it's not what you expected. It's completely different. Nobody kind of helps guide you to what you're going to be encountering. Your parents don't teach you about the political games going on. The university certainly doesn't. And then suddenly you're confronted with the reality, and it can be very brutal. And excuse me one second. I'm just getting my tea here. Thank you. That's been always the impetus behind my book. So the 48 Laws of Power, I kind of entered Hollywood in the late 80s, once again filled with all these illusions about, the film business and the creativity involved in writing screenplays. And then soon enough, I had to confront the fact that it was really just about power. It really wasn't about creating films, that people were obsessed with power. And nobody kind of writes about this. It's sort of like our dirty little secret. It's our dirty little laundry that no one wants to reveal. And so I wanted to write a book, beginning with the 48 Laws of Power, that kind of stripped away the curtain and showed you what's really going on behind closed doors in the halls of power, what really motivates people, kind of what's going on behind the mask that people tend to wear, so that you'll be armed with knowledge about what's really going on in the world and not be filled with all these silly illusions like I had been filled with. And so it's sort of the theme running throughout all of my books. The basic misunderstandings are not just about people, and because that's a lot of it in the political games, but it's also about ourselves. We're filled with a lot of illusions about who we are, about what we're supposed to be doing in life, about what's cool and what's not cool, et cetera, et cetera. And so I want to kind of educate you in what I consider to be the most powerful attitude you can have towards life, to be able to see through all the bullshit that's in our culture, that's on social media, that we kind of absorb from our parents, from our teachers, etc., and give you kind of dip you into reality, giving you a straight shot of it, so that you won't make the classic mistakes that I have made in my early years.
I saw a great video that you put up, just saying that when you're coming up through the ranks, connections, money, they're not really that important. It's all about your attitude. And for you, the attitude was, as you say, seeing through the bullshit, seeing things as they really are, hyper reality, not as you wanted them to be, not as you wish that they could be. How did you start to see through the bullshit? It's pretty easy to not see through the bullshit. It's pretty easy to just keep looking at the nice fluffy way you wish the world could be. How did you start to cut through that and look at the real world?
Part of it's my own nature, my own proclivity. Since I was a child, I've always been kind of an observer of people. I never took their words for reality. So when people said that this was what their intentions were, blah, 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 I always liked to analyze what I thought was really going on. I didn't listen to what people said, right? But then the real kind of inspiration for it, what really educated me, were the mistakes that I made. And they're very painful mistakes. And so when you go through these kind of painful mistakes, you can do one of two things. You can either get all angry and blame other people and say, it's this person's fault, they did this to me, and sort of assume that you're the victim. Or you can try the opposite tack, which is maybe I'm partially to blame for it. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe there's something in me that is causing these things to happen. So when I can't remember how old I was late 20s, let's say, I was working at a job in television business, and the job was to find stories that would eventually be put on television. It was kind of a documentary style. And I was by far the best researcher there. I had, if the percentages were there, like 60, 70% of the stories that were filmed were my own, even though we had a team of like 10 people. So I was producing at an incredible rate. But my boss was really, really unhappy with what I was doing, and she was kind of torturing me about it, as if something was wrong with me, but I was producing, so I didn't understand. And then basically it came out that she thought I had a bad attitude. And I didn't really have a bad attitude, but she was kind of making me have a bad attitude. And then eventually I quit. I was probably going to be fired soon. And it was kind of irritating to think about. But then as time passed, I thought about it deeply, and I decided that I had outshone the master. Law number 1, never outshine the master. That in trying so hard and trying to prove that I was the best person there, I was kind of tripping on her ego and making her feel a little bit insecure, that maybe I thought I was better than she was. And so afterwards, it was very kind of, why would I be fired or be in the shithole when I was the person producing the best work? And, it was like a riddle. It didn't make sense. And so then I eventually figured it out. So through the kind of negative experiences I've had, and there are many others because I've had many different jobs, I kind of go through a process of self-analysis, right? I step back and I go, maybe it was my fault in this case. Maybe I did have an attitude. Maybe I did think I was better than she was, and maybe it showed up. Maybe I could have played the game a little bit differently. And that's sort of the beginning of kind of crafting what I call a realistic attitude.
I guess with that outshine the master, it's something that, well, you've obviously had a powerful experience with it. Ashley and myself have had different experience with it. What sort of people who say if they're managers are not insecure? Because I feel like sometimes, we might catch ourselves always trying to not outshine the master, but, sometimes the manager might want the best for you and actually want you to try and shine. So, how do you know if someone's secure enough for you to actually shine as bright as you possibly can, for lack of a better phrasing?
Well, you can get a sense of people very early on, very quickly. We're not bad at this kind of game. You get a sense that you're dealing with someone who's very insecure. They won't show it right away. And the problem that we have is we naturally assume that a person in power, someone who's reached the top of the profession or whatever it is, that they feel very confident and secure. We assume that. But the truth is that the higher up you rise in life, the more insecure you tend to become. You've got more at stake. You've got a reputation to hold. You're constantly wondering, do people like me? Is my performance as good as it was 5 years ago? So you have to begin with the assumption that the people above you are more insecure than you think they are. All right? And if, yes, you want to impress them. Yes, you want to show yourself in the right light. But realize that even the best manager, even the one who seems to want to, for you to perform, still has insecurities, still has an ego, and you have to be careful, right? So you kind of scope it out in the beginning. First of all, I always tell people, when you go into an office or you go into a new job, get a feeling of the temperature of the office and the people who work around that particular person. Is everybody kind of tense and nervous? Are they very careful about what they say? Are they walking around kind of like frightened little mice in the hallway, terrified of, you're getting a good sense that this is a boss who's kind of very insecure and has to kind of intimidate people. Or you enter an office and people are kind of smiling and open and they feel free to say whatever they want, etc. It's probably a case where you can relax and be a little bit more yourself. So I talk in The Laws of Human Nature in my other books that every place you enter has a culture, right? When you put people together, they create their own kind of culture, their own kind of political mood. You have to become a master observer of the group dynamic, right? And you get a feel for it by looking at how people are responding, how freely they talk, how much they feel open to kind of express themselves. You need to be able to fit in. So if it's a really tight, kind of closed, stick up the butt kind of atmosphere, you better be a little bit cautious, particularly in the beginning. But if it's the opposite, like I gave a talk at Google, and I walk in there, and it's like a child's playground, There's like toys everywhere. There's all these games. There's ping pong tables. People are laughing, et cetera, et cetera. Then I go to Microsoft. This was before I went to Google, but Microsoft, it was the exact opposite. Everyone was it was like Soviet Union in the 60s or something. So you get a feel for the place, and that will kind of tell you whether you have a little more license to do some shining or not.
Yeah, there's so much in that. One of the things you say in mastery is that if we're trying to reach mastery, the only way to fast track development can be, through finding a mentor. For a lot of people out there, they might not have such a high status that the quality of mentors that they can attract, will be anything close to what you might get, say, through books and also, different authors around the world like yourself. So, how can people get most out of, say, the mentorship through books, if that's their way of getting their mentorship?
Well, the first thing I would say is you have a better chance of finding a mentor than you think you do, a real life flesh and blood mentor. But the thing is, you have to be able to offer something to them, right? So maybe if there's somebody on your radar that you would like, or a couple people that you'd like to have as a mentor, maybe prepare yourself and realize the thing that people need the most is to save them time. They need organization. You're obviously going to be younger than the person who's your mentor. You obviously can know more about the internet, about social media than they are. You have things to offer. So maybe hone those skills and prepare a little bit, but always keep in mind that you have a better chance than you imagine. Because in the world today, people like myself, we're working so hard. We have so many obligations. We're much busier than we ever were before. And someone who's young and fresh, who's in their early 20s, who comes around, who's enthusiastic, who has knowledge of the internet that I don't have, who can organize my life, I'm going to be much more open than you might think to having them. But then to get to your point, you need to, it's like the voice of the writer becomes kind of your mentor, right? So in a real life situation, you're kind of you're kind of reading between the lines. You're picking up the energy of that person, right? And you're listening very attentively to what they have to say. And so the problem with a book is inevitably you're not going to agree with everything, and it's not going to exactly fit your circumstances, right? So the 48 Laws of Power, just to choose my own book, I'm being narcissistic here, but if it's the 48 Laws of Power,
We all are,
obviously they're going to, right? Obviously, not all the laws are going to apply. You're not probably crush your enemy totally isn't something that's really relevant to your personal life, although it might be. I don't know. Maybe in Australia it is. But so you've got to kind of figure out what is really relevant to your life, right? And not take everything seriously. Not be trying to figure out how can I use crush my enemy totally when the place that I'm working in where it's not relevant. So don't be so respectful of the book that you're like, following every little word to the letter. Pick and choose the aspects that fit where you are right now in life. And then constantly realize that your life is changing and that you need to find books that are kind of fit where you are in that particular moment, right? So I think it's much better personally to try and find a real flesh and blood mentor. I understand that that's not possible. I learned a lot of things from certain books, like Machiavelli, right? He kind of schooled me in how to have a realistic attitude towards life, to look at not what people say, but at their actions, kind of thing. But I didn't follow everything in the prints. I'm not Cesare Borgia. I'm not cutting people's heads off. So I saw clearly, as a young man in Los Angeles, California, this bit of advice hit me very close, about looking at people's actions and not their words. So you've got to kind of have some focus on what is something applicable to where you are and what isn't.
Nice. You had you jumped around a lot. I think I've heard you've had 60 plus different jobs throughout your life at all different status and seniority levels, all different industries.
Yep.
And I think you said it wasn't until about age 36, 37, 38 where you first started to feel like you actually achieved some kind of success. Did you feel like that was inevitable? Did you ever give up hope? How long were you kind of pursuing something, for yourself as opposed to working for somebody else? What was how was that journey for 60 different jobs over 37 odd years?
Yeah, I mean, I never in my life did I hold a job more than 11 months. And usually they were often quite a bit shorter than that. Well, yeah, to be honest with you, it's hard to know in the present what your state of mind was because, we're talking 30 years ago now, at least 30 years ago. But I can remember that I had an up and down kind of mental life. There were times where I thought, I'm a writer, I have some skill, I've had all this experience, I have this knowledge. I know I'm meant to accomplish something in this world. So don't give up hope, I would be telling myself. Keep trying. Then there would be obviously moments where I'd get extremely depressed. And I can even say some moments I maybe even felt faintly suicidal. Things weren't clicking. I felt like I deserved to be able to get somewhere, but I just didn't know how. I couldn't solve that riddle of what exactly I was meant to accomplish. I tried journalism when we're talking about writing. That didn't seem like a good enough fit. I tried writing novels. I guess maybe I was too young or I wasn't disciplined enough. That wasn't working out. I tried writing for the theater. I tried writing screenplays. I didn't like the fact that I had no power in writing a screenplay. It also wasn't a process that I enjoyed. What is it, So at the very bottom, when you reach that bottom, when you feel really low, sometimes you can sink even deeper. And when you sink even deeper, you kind of give up and you go, damn it, I just got to go to law school or business school or I got to start working at a restaurant. This isn't going to work out. But I had a floor that wouldn't or something, I don't know what the metaphor is, that wouldn't let me sink further down. And basically it was, I knew that there was something in me, that I had something, that it was meant, that it could come together in some way. So even when I got low, I would kind of bounce back up because I had this kind of genuine faith in myself. And a lot of people, they don't necessarily have that. And I understand and I feel very bad because it's easy to give up. That's the easiest route to take. And I probably was, at certain moments, I've kind of, flirted with that. But mastery is where I really address that issue. So if you're clear in your 20s, particularly, of what you were meant to do in life, what I call your life's task, your destiny, like I'm meant to be an entrepreneur, I'm meant to be a writer, I'm meant to be an athlete, I'm meant to have the best podcast in Australia that ever existed, whatever it is. You've got a frame of reference. You're not lost, right? This is what you were destined to do. And then you try different things and you explore and you figure out, I like this, I don't like that. But when you have that kind of sense of, I am destined to create something, I'm unique, there's something special about me, and each person has that. If you can figure out, as I call it, solve that riddle, then you'll have that kind of ground that you won't sink below, and it'll kind of keep you trudging even though things aren't necessarily going so well in the present.
You mentioned how you almost had that moment. You're like, fuck it, I'm going to go and do law, or fuck it, I'm going to go and work at a restaurant. Yeah. I mean, everyone's probably had those temptations. What are these forces sort of, pulling at us in that direction? So if we can better understand it, then maybe we don't, succumb to that temptation.
Well, the most obvious force is to survive, to eat, to be able to pay your rent, to be able to pay your bills, you know. That was staring me in the face. And so you have to, that's everyone's going to be facing that at some point. And I understand you can't like go through life saying, I want to be a poet and think that you're going to make a living writing poetry because it's just unrealistic. You've got to find another way of doing it. So it's a mix of being practical and then having some sort of ideals about who you are. If you're too realistic, then you won't have the energy and the drive to kind of keep pushing yourself forward. But if you're too full of these romantic notions of what you'll want in life, you'll never be practical enough to make it happen in the moment, right? So it's kind of a balancing act between those two things, and I had my own way of doing it, which I don't say is necessarily the best. It was my way, which was here in Los Angeles. I kind of realized Hollywood is not for me. I don't like it. But there was money to be had in freelance jobs. I could work 3 months working on a film. I would make good money for myself. And then I would quit the job and I would spend 6 months writing. And then my bank account would reach like $10 and I'm not going to be able to eat. Mm-hmm. All right, then I'd get another horrible soul-sucking job that would pay my bills for another 3 months. So I could keep, of course, if I kept on doing that into my 50s, that wouldn't work. That would be, I wouldn't have the energy or the drive. But for a period of time, so what happens to a lot of people is they give up and they go for that big paycheck. They go, I can't handle this anymore. I wanted to be an artist or whatever it is. I can't handle the grind. I'm just going to go to law school. I'm going to go to business school. I'm going to get the big paycheck. And I understand that that's very human. I don't necessarily denigrate that at all. The problem is that it's not really you. It's not really something that excites you. It's not something that you're emotionally connected to. Yes, it will pay for your bills, but paying your bills is not everything in life. You also have to feed your soul. You also have to feel excited by what you're doing. Otherwise, you're in a trajectory, you're in a trajectory by the time you're in your 40s where you're going to feel a little bit burned out. And that soul-sucking nature of your job is going to start really weighing on you. And you'll find yourself, going into drugs and alcohol and kind of behavior patterns to kind of help, deal with the fact that you're not living up to your youthful expectations. So, you have to realize that it's important to have a paycheck. It's important to pay your bills. But there's always ways in this world to do that in kind of and still keep your other dreams alive. So you could go get that job that you really hate, but you can also be going to night school and taking other classes and things that will eventually in a year allow you to quit and go more in the direction that you want, right? So just realize that it's important to be practical. It's important to have food on the table. But if you give up everything for that, then you're going to pay a price for it, I think.
Mm. One of the
transitioning over. Sorry,
you go, Shay.
I was going to switch over to the new book. Have you got something else before we go to that, Jonesy?
Well, just on that process of mastery on this topic. So that you start off discover your calling and cultivating a unique seed, and then an apprenticeship, and then creative active. Do you see this as something, a dynamic thing that you actually do multiple times in your life, this process, or is it something that you nail it once, you got the one calling, and then you go through the process only once and that's about it?
Well, some people have different trajectories. I've had people that I've encountered in life who kind of figured out their life's task in their 20s and went in a certain direction. And then they kind of have a restless nature, and they figured, I want more. I'm getting a little bored with this. And then they would figure out something else, and they would try some other. Oh, damn it! Sorry. Siri sometimes interrupts me. And here she does again. Go away, Siri. God, fuck off.
Now, you've evoked
I mentioned her name. She Anyway, so so sometimes, yeah, if you have to know yourself. That's the most important thing in life. That's what's inscribed on the Greek temple at Delphi in ancient Greece. Know thyself. Knowing who you are is the most critical thing. So if you have that kind of restless nature where you love mastering a particular field, and then it reaches a point where you're curious and you want to do something else, then that's fine. But the main thing is to not be a dilettante, to not like try for a year or two to be a musician and give up, and then go try and work on Wall Street for a year or two and then give up, and then try and, do something else. You're never going to master anything. So if you spend the 8 years becoming a great writer, but you want something else in life, you want to do some science, all right, now go master some field of science. And maybe eventually you'll combine your new knowledge of science with your writing, which will be even more brilliant, right? So, but the thing is, you want to have some kind of direction, some kind of focus. Now, your question is, does this process go on through your life? Yes, it does, but not in the same way. So you continually want to feel like you are an apprentice, that you are learning, right? So the idea of being excited and wanting to learn and wanting to develop new skills is, to me, the essence of being a genius, of being a true creative person, right? You don't settle. What happens is, as you get older, as you get into your 30s and 40s, your ideas start to harden, they start to freeze up. You tell yourself, I know all the answers. I'm so brilliant, I figured it all out. I don't need to learn anything else. You're not maybe telling yourself that, but unconsciously, that's how you're feeling. And you get more and more closed to anything new or different in your life, right? And you stop learning. And then eventually your work kind of reflects that. It kind of becomes lifeless, right? So you want to feel like you're a child, continually putting yourself back in the position of a child. You're curious, you're excited, you need to learn more. You need to go through the kind of a sped up apprenticeship process again, where you're observing and learning and developing new skills. It's not the same if I now wanted to learn or go in a different direction. It's not the same as when I was in my 20s, where I'd spent 8 years, right, doing something and then dropping. So, I still, each time I write a book, for me personally, I make the subject different so that I have to go through a kind of an apprenticeship in the new subject that I'm dealing with. So I challenge myself so I never get bored or feel like I'm in a rut, But that's kind of how you have to approach life. You have to know yourself, and whether you are one of those restless spirits or whether you feel comfortable. If you're somebody who's comfortable, who wants to master music or chess, just know that you have to continually find new challenges in your life, or it's going to become stale in some way.
It's incredible advice. Let's jump over to the Daily Laws, the brand new book, which is kind of like the best of Robert Greene, the best.
You turn yourself up a bit, Asho. Little.
Turn up. Is that better?
Yeah.
The best of Robert Greene, human nature, power, seduction, war, mastery, all rolled into one. How did you go about breaking down all of that stuff into 12 monthly actions, plus then the 366 daily tasks? It would have been a lot to try to get into that perfect sort of annual sort of training for the whole year.
Well, I had somebody help me, obviously. I didn't do it all myself. But basically, we would look for the passages that seemed the most kind of the strongest, that seemed to be, to have the most kind of, and that I know that readers really responded to, right? So, and also kind of summarized an idea in the most powerful way. So if you begin with the idea, which was the germ for this book, that I want people to slowly absorb my way of thinking on a day-by-day basis, kind of that realistic attitude I was talking about, where you're able to look at yourself in a realistic way, you're able to look at people in a realistic way, you're able to look at the world and the trends going on in that realistic vein. If that's the starting point, then I have to choose passages from my books that kind of exemplify that hit the hardest in each of those different areas, right? So, for instance, I have that idea of alive time versus dead time that Ryan Holiday, my former mentee, really liked. And I knew a lot of people talk about that. They're really excited about it. It's kind of an interesting idea. All right, that's obviously going to be a passage. All right, now I have to find 365 more of those. So it was a bit arduous. And then it had to have a structure. It can't just be a mishmash of those kind of greatest hits, because it'll be incoherent. It won't mean anything. So there had to be a structure to it, and I decided the beginning of the year should be about mastery, about figuring out your career, because it's often the time where the new year is there and we're kind of reassessing our life. The cliche of new year, new you, and you're kind of wondering whether I'm going in the right direction. So it seemed like that was the best place to kind of touch upon life's task and mastery. And then it kind of just sort of fell into place where then I examined power and manipulation and dealing with toxic people. Sort of like you figured out what you're meant to do. Now you're going into a job. You have to deal with all these awful people somehow. So that was sort of the next through line, the next 3 months. And then the following 3 months were about persuasion and influence and seduction, which is a key theme in all of my books, and strategizing. And then finally, the summation of it all was human nature and knowing people and knowing their psychology on a higher level, kind of ending with my new book, The Sublime, in the month of December. So it kind of had a narrative flow. It's not too tight, because if it was so tight, I think it would be kind of irritating. So it's sort of loose in the sense of the month is about this, but it kind of floats among different themes and it comes at you in different angles. I don't know if it succeeded or not, because the success will depend on how the readers respond to it, quite frankly. It was harder because my other books, I'm able to control in a very forceful way how things kind of play out, the logic behind it. I'm very keyed in on exactly how the reader is going to follow the way the chapters flow. This book, I didn't have that option. So it was a little bit of a new process for me. But that was sort of how I went about it.
Through a lot of your books, like Seduction and Power and Strategy and everything, there's a lot of ideas in there that can be applied to launching a product and the marketing process. What ones are your go-to when you're launching a new product that is your mantra for getting certain things right to make the product a success?
Well, you have to kind of be able to get outside of yourself. So what happens is, if it's a product or a book or whatever it is you're producing, you tend to be locked inside your brain. You have this idea and you either overestimate it or underestimate. Usually you overestimate. You think it's brilliant. You think you know how to do it, right? And then it goes out in the world and people don't respond to the way you think they should respond. And that is because they're different people than you. They have their own psychology. They have their own experience. They didn't grow up where you grew up. They didn't have your parents. They're different. So the number one thing is to know your audience, to know who you're communicating to have some kind of access, in whatever form that is, to what their tastes are, their drives, and to get feedback before you launch this product from friends, from people you trust, from an outside perspective, to say, this is what's good about your product, this is what sucks about it, and because you don't have any perspective on it. Now, over time, you kind of develop the ability to look at your own work as if you're looking at it from an outside perspective. That's sometimes a little bit hard to do. But the closer you move to your audience, to what they want, to what excites them, the more power your launch is going to have, right? And so part of that is to have a feel for what's going on in the world, what I call the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. I have a chapter in that on the laws of human nature. So to the degree that you have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the world, and you understand very deeply, not only that, but you can anticipate in 3 months or a year, this is where the world is headed. This is something that hasn't been tried before. This is a need that people have that hasn't been met yet. And I'm going to be the one, through my new product, my new launch, that's going to feed this need, that'll have even more power and resonance with people. So being able to get outside of yourself and outside of your own ideas and delve into what's going on in the world and delve into how other people are thinking about it is, to me, by far the most important initial step in the process.
Have you got a sense? I know it's only a couple of weeks into the book launch, but have you got a sense as to what is resonating with people the most at the moment? I know I was listening to a bunch of your recent interviews, and it seemed like a lot of people were asking you about seduction. I don't know if that was just I don't know if that was just because they were the ones I listened to, or if there's something in, maybe the zeitgeist, maybe there's something in today's society where that's coming back into vogue. Where
I don't know. I mean, the books of mine that sell the most right now is Power and the Laws of Human Nature, and then Mastery would be in third place. Seduction is kind of like in fourth, maybe behind that. So it's not my fastest selling book, but it is something. We live in an era. I'm not in the dating age. I'm in a relationship for quite a while now, but we live in an era of like Tinder, a dating apps kind of thing, where it's kind of impersonal. And the problem that people have nowadays is they spend so much time on their phones, right? That they've lost that sense of how to read people in the moment. They've lost the kind of physical aspect of being a human being. So when you're meeting someone for the first time in a bar, in a restaurant, wherever, or at a party, you're kind of looking in the eye, you're picking up the things that aren't expressed, their body language, etc., things that excite you, things that don't excite you, right? And these are skills that we all develop, right? The ability to sense people, to sense their energy, to sense their level of engagement with you, to whether there's a connection between you. If all of our dating and our meeting people is basically virtual, you might find somebody that connects to you, but you're not developing that skill that is part of being a human being, which is being able to pick up the moods of people. So I can't read both of you guys' thoughts right now. I'm not telepathic. I hate to say it, but I can pick up your mood. I can even do that right now. It's harder on virtually, but I can kind of sense your mood, how you're feeling in the moment, because we have in our brains these mirror neurons. I talk about that in Mastery, that allow us to put ourselves in the bodies of other people, kind of feel how they are feeling. And it's not, as I said, it's not the thoughts, because that's impossible, but we're emotional animals. We pick up the energy that people have. We can sense that they're depressed, that they're stressed, that they're open, they're relaxed. And so that's a skill you develop in in-person meetings. And it's a skill that's being degraded in our modern world because people spend so much damn time on their phones doing dating apps or whatever, and they're almost become afraid of the confrontation of the flesh-to-flesh encounters. And so if you start becoming afraid, or unconsciously you think you're not ready for it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. You're going to feel more and more intimidated in those situations. So I think that's why people might be discussing seduction now, that a lot of that. So the people who've interviewed me were saying a lot of young men, if that's their audience, are feeling very confused right now about issues about dating and young women and how to not pick them up, but how to start a relationship, etc. And then the women interviewing will say they get a lot of that from their audience. It's just anecdotal, but what they're telling me is that a lot of their readers, their listeners, their audience is beginning to question themselves, like they feel at sea. They don't really understand the process of what it is, how to appeal, how to get inside the psychology of the other person. They can click and they can swipe all day on their phones until they find someone who physically excites them and who has maybe some of the same interests as they do. But the ability to feel what the other person is and to be able to have a conversation, to have a real good conversation where you're able to connect, where you're able to listen, you're able to understand the people. People feel at sea in this. They're confused. They're losing these skills. And I think that might be some of the impetus behind why people are talking to me about seduction.
I get the feeling, just hearing, people in interviews as well, or just a general, culture and reaction to a lot of your work. I feel like a lot of people have a hard time with the the Fox character, the Machiavellian Fox character. We're using human nature for deception and whatnot. I recently read a book by Sam Harris. I mean, I couldn't articulate what that response is, but I feel like he kind of does. But he says when in lying, there's acts of omission and acts of commission. So omission is where you don't say you lie, but you're sort of decepting in a certain way. And he also says that lying is the royal road to chaos. And in committing to being honest with everyone, we're solving things for the short term, but causing problems for the long term. What's your take on, I guess, the argument against sort of the Fox character or those power games that we might play?
Well, we're talking in these generalities, and I really hate talking in generalities. So I'm not saying it's always wise to be lying in every situation. That's pure stupidity on my part. I'm saying there are moments when you have to tell a white lie or even a greater lie. I read somewhere recently where someone said, you believe that lying is always bad? Well, then you don't believe in etiquette. Because basic etiquette requires continual lying. You never tell Ashton exactly how you feel about the clothes that he's wearing or about something he said that you think was kind of stupid. You're never honest with him. You're always kind of coloring it in a way. That's real life. So get over these bullshit notions that we're always being honest, because that's the fairy tale version we've been spoon-fed. That's when I talked about earlier on about all of these illusions that we enter life with. Children at the age of 3 are continually lying to their parents to manipulate them, right? They're crying when they don't really feel like they're sad because they want to get that present. They want to be able to go out and play on the street. They're manipulating their parents. To be a human is to be a born actor. We learn from very early on how to mold our face, our gestures, to get the response that we want from other people. And there's a brilliant American sociologist whose books I love called Irving Goffman. I can't remember the title of his most famous book, but basically he analyzed how in all social interactions, in virtually every realm, people are play acting, right? They're listening to a script, they're kind of telling a story, they're not being truthful, right? It's not like the kind of overt lie when President Trump says something that's obviously not true and it's like a really ugly lie. We can all see through it. These are shaded white lies, those kind of white lies that we tell in order to be socially accepted. I don't care who the hell you are. I don't care what writer you are. You're doing that all the time, every day. Then there are the bigger lies. There's the more manipulative ones that I discuss in the 48 Laws of Power. Yes, sometimes that kind of overt manipulation will bite you in the butt, and you have to be careful with them. But believe me, there are plenty of powerful people in this world who have lied, who've deceived, who manipulated, who never once paid a price for it. So get over also this kind of fairy tale illusion that you will always pay a price for your lies, because that's not how it works in the world, right? Okay, so you have to have your own ethical compass in life. You can't get it from Sam Harris. You can't get it from Robert Greene. It has to come from you from within. I'm not comfortable with doing this. I'm not comfortable with being manipulative. I'm fine with that. I'm just telling you in my book, don't be naive, because there are other people out there who will be playing those games on you. And you may not want to play them yourself. I'm not someone who's comfortable overtly manipulating people. It's not my nature. But you don't want to be the naive little innocent lamb going through life, being everyone is honest and truthful. Can't we just be ourselves? Blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, all these people are playing games with you, and you get a world of hurt. You get a lot of pain in your life. So I hate these kind of black and white writers who say this about lying and deception, because it's not the truth. We live in a world that's not black and white. There's a lot of grays in between. There are moments where the white lie is the only thing you can do, and there are moments where being honest is the right method. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that's Sort of my approach.
100%. I think is
I
that
must
book. It
admit,
is.
I didn't understand that question at all, but that was a fantastic answer.
Oh, it was a phenomenal answer because the book is black and white, right? It says it even has a go at white lies and tries to explain how white lies in any context is a bad thing. So I think, yeah, that's exactly a great answer to
Really?
go against that. It does,
I didn't
yeah.
know Sam. I thought, okay, wow.
It's a 40-page book,
Can you,
so it might be worth having a read
oh,
and then pull it apart.
is it really?
Yeah, it's a
No.
very
Is it
short
really
book.
for? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there's a bit of a cash cow, maybe. That Siri in the background again?
What's that? No. It's just my landline. I'm on. It's just ignored. It's gonna be. It's telemarketing here in the States.
It's all good.
Spam. Yeah.
It's we last
Okay.
we last spoke to you in February 2019, actually, when you just sort
You
of
did? You
not-
interviewed me back then?
we did not long after the launch of the Laws of Human Nature, not long after
Really?
the bee sting and the stroke.
God, I'm getting
actually.
old, man. Jesus, I can't believe I don't remember that.
Well, since
Wow,
then, I
that
guess
makes me really feel like something's like pieces of my brain are falling out. But anyway,
Oh, we're not too
we're not that memorable, yeah.
we're not that memorable.
oh yes, you are. Yes, you are. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, go ahead.
I was just going to say, obviously, like in those 2.5, almost 3 years since we last spoke, you've gone through the bee sting, gone through a stroke, a global pandemic. You've launched the Daily Laws. You're working on a brand new book, The Sublime. How's the last couple of years been? And we're pretty curious about the new book that's coming as well. I know we've only just got a brand new book from you, but we're also excited for the next one too.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, it's been a weird. I actually before, if we spoke in 2019, my stroke was in 2018. So, it's what can I say? It's been a wild ride. It's been up and down, a lot of pain, a lot of things that I wish I never had to deal with. But then there are people, obviously, with COVID who've dealt with a lot worse than I am. I'm still alive. I still have most of my brain here. But I lost, the ability to walk really well. So I can't go out my house and take a hike. And the things that gave me a lot of pleasure, my swimming, my hiking, my bicycling, has just suddenly been taken away from me, and I still can't do them. So I've had to develop mental skills that I never had before, patience that I never had before, acceptance of myself that I never had before. And it's been tough. I don't want to gloss over and paint this picture of this person who's got it all together and who's figured it all out and is so insanely powerful, because I've had some moments of, what's going on here? I can't deal with this. But I've been dealing with it, and I'm getting better, and I'm learning about my own limitations. And then, of course, the pandemic hit, and that was insane here. Obviously in Australia, it was, you dealt with it in your own way. But, none of us have ever been through anything like that, right? And the levels of fear that we had about going outside, we don't really experience that so much right now. But that weird first few months where we didn't really know what was going on, and we were washing our hands all the time, doing all these kind of weird things, it kind of played a game on us, and it mentally, and it kind of, I don't know, it made us more fearful than we maybe necessarily had to be, although it really did have to be cautious. But we were operating in kind of sort of a lot of ignorance about what was going on. So that was a weird time. And, obviously a lot of people, it was very, very, very painful. It also taught us a lot. I think it taught me a lot about human nature and about how we react to circumstances like that. And I was telling people that you have to look at this not in some Pollyannish way that everything is for the best. That's silly. But that there is something to be gained out of even the worst kind of situation. So when I had my stroke, which was the worst thing that's ever happened to me personally, although I've had my father passing away, would have to rank second to that. But that was like the worst thing that ever happened to me. But there have been things that were good about it. It kind of taught me certain things. It made me have a degree of humility that I never had. It made me have more empathy towards people who who had physical disabilities or mental disabilities. It also taught me to slow down. It also taught me what it is I should appreciate in my life, that I'm still alive, that I'm still breathing, that I can write another book. So even in the worst circumstances, you can kind of get some kind of positive value. And then to add to here in the States, although the whole world had to, we had to deal with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump was like having a crazy uncle living in your little bedroom for 4 years, yelling and ranting, and you can't get him to shut up and you can't shove him in the closet. He's in your face. He's like, you love him or hate him, you can't escape from him. And it was intense. I happen not to have been a great fan of his, that's putting it mildly. But I don't want to get political here. That's not our point. It's just that kind of insecurity about America, about what's going on in our country, which we're still dealing with, and the pandemic, it was a rough, weird time, interesting time. I don't think I've never been through anything like that in my life. And my mother, God bless her, who's 94, she's been through the Great Depression, which was in some ways obviously worse. But to her, this was like she never experienced anything quite like this either. So,
yeah, there's that tension. Like I had a mate, I wasn't at this house for last week. There was almost a punch on because it was around the forceful, taking of vaccines, and then there's another, family Christmas where everyone's getting asked if have you had the vax? And then obviously there's going to be one auntie or uncle who hasn't, and more tension there. So there's this crazy tension going on, it seems like.
right.
So, how do we navigate this and sort of best deal with it as people with all different perspectives on the world?
Well, on the one hand, you want to be kind of empathetic. There are people who have different viewpoints, particularly politically, and I have to learn to do that as well. Not everyone's going to have my own particular beliefs. I have to respect that. But when it comes to people's health, I'm sorry, I draw the line. When you're more worried about what's maybe going into your body and what, things that might happen, and you're not really caring about the hundreds of people you're coming in contact with every day, that you could be a secret carrier of COVID and be infecting people, and maybe even they're dying from it, that's just pure selfishness. So I have no empathy for people like that. Get the bloody vaccine, right? And don't be such a fragile little, I forget the snowflake, as we call it here, where you're so worried about something going into your body. You're probably eating food that's got all sorts of chemicals in it. You're not thinking twice about that.
Probably
right?
a lot of cocaine and all sorts of stuff, like the same people who are worried about the vax, ciggies and
right.
a whole lot.
Yeah, living in the 21st century and all the pollution and all the stuff in our food and everything going on is far more powerful than any possible negative consequence from a vaccine. So, be strong. Don't be so weak that you're so worried about. I mean, a lot of it is this kind of rebellious attitude where you don't want to do what the government is telling you to do. I understand that. I have a rebellious quality myself. And if that's the main motivation, I can understand that a little bit. But, that's a kind of an adolescent viewpoint. You get over that. You say, for the sake of my friends, my parents, my colleagues, people who are older, I'm going to think of them. And if for some reason this vaccine turns me into a chimpanzee, as some people worry about, well, that's great. I'll get to be a chimpanzee. What an amazing experience that would be.
It would be different, that's for sure. As a book podcast, we normally ask our guests what books have been most influential on them. But we asked you last time, and you mentioned Machiavelli, von Clausewitz, Carlos Castaneda.
Wow.
So we'll ask you a different question.
Thank you.
Who are some of the more modern your contemporaries? Who are the modern authors or books that you're really drawn to?
Well, Carlos Castaneda is fairly modern, at least for me, because I was growing up with those books. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is written in the 50s. Okay, that's getting a little, meant a lot to me. There's an Italian writer who's a little more, I don't know, academic is the word, who I love a lot, who just passed away 2 months ago, named Roberto Calasso, who I just love his books. He wrote a book called The Ruin of Kosh, which was, I just think, absolutely insanely brilliant. And then he has written a book called The Celestial Hunter that I read recently. He talks about writes a lot about ancient Greece, which is a fascination of mine. And I'm using a lot of what he wrote in my new book on the sublime. Then there's some psychologists who are more contemporary, who I'm very into. As far as political writers and whatnot, nothing comes to mind. I mean, I know when I was writing the war book, there's some brilliant writers about warfare that really inspired me. I found very exciting. Their names aren't coming to mind. I'm sorry. I'm 62 years old. My brain, I can't even remember that you already interviewed me. So I can plead, kind of early Alzheimer's or something, or pre-senility. So they're, but as far as like a real contemporary writer, I don't know. There are some too, and there's some really interesting. I know, I love the novelist Toni Morrison. Always really loved her work, and I think her work is brilliant. She passed away fairly recently. I know I'm leaving somebody out, but I can't remember it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I like your guys' book, even though I haven't read it. I'm sure your book is really good.
We'll take that.
I'm sorry. I know there's something. It's driving me crazy. It'll come to me maybe eventually.
We might sniff that Robert Greene quote and we'll put it on the front cover. Robert Greene's favorite contemporary book.
Okay. You have to really snip quite a bit. I know Ryan Holiday's books are really good. Of course, I'm a little prejudiced because I kind of trained him, so I'm being narcissistic again here. Nice. But there are other people. I don't know what my problem is. Sorry, it'll come to me. Anyway.
Well, that's so good. Well, as we're wrapping it up, thank you so much, Robert Greene. As we said, we're super, enjoy your work, and you've slapped us across the face 100 times throughout all your books. And for everyone listening right now, they're going to go out and buy the Daily Laws because there's going to be 366. I guess they're not all slaps. Probably, I'd say 50 slaps and then 50 pats on the back and then all sorts of things. But something powerful each day. So
that's a really good way of putting it. Thank you. I'm going to use that myself. Thank you. And hopefully, if you have me on again in a few years, I'm going to make a point of remembering. I'm going to write it down and I'm going to remember it. And I'm going to have an answer for contemporary writers that I like. I promise you.
When can we expect the new book? I know you've only just given us this.
Well, just please be patient, because the problem that I have is with my stroke, I can't type. So I'm like somebody from the 14th century right now. I handwrite everything in a notebook, and then I rewrite it in a notebook. It's almost like a medieval text or something, with things in between and all sorts of pencil marks. And then finally I have to dictate it into my computer because I can't type. And the dictation process on these computers is so wonky that it comes out like a monkey typed it or something. And then I have to go in with one hand and edit it. And then so it's slow. It's driving me crazy. But okay, so to answer your question, probably optimistically 2 years, realistically like 3 years.
Awesome. Cool.
Hopefully we're all alive by then. Still alive, myself included.
Not chimpanzees.
No, I think that'd be really interesting. People were actually claiming it's going to change your DNA into a prime. Well, we are primates, into a chimpanzee. Well, I'd love that. That would be fantastic.
There's a good lizard conspiracy as well out there. I think we turn into lizards, and Bill Gates apparently is already a lizard. So there's a few interesting theories out there. We can, retrospectively see how accurate they were.
Yeah, well, in my new book, I talk about the ancient ideal of becoming part animal. Like in ancient Egypt, all the gods were part animal, part human, and how amazing that was. And the thought of having like a human body and the head of an eagle, and you were actually, I would love that if I could become a lizard or a chimpanzee. I'd be the happiest person on the planet. So I'm gonna go get a triple dose now. Hopefully, bring it on.
Just to accelerate the process. I love it.
That's so good.
Robert Greene, thank you so much. It was fantastic.
Well, thank you guys. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
speaking in
We'd
2024.
actually, what was that, a show?
Looking forward to speaking in 2024
Oh.
about the Sublime.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Okay. We'll stop it there. We'd actually love to send you a copy of our book.
Oh, please. So can you liaise with my assistant Jackson? He'll give you the address to send that to. I would love that, though, please.
Yeah,
And then I'll give an endorsement for your next book, or you can take that snippet if you want and run with it.
That would be absolutely huge for us. So we'll
That'd be
definitely
incredible.
we'll definitely follow you up on that one. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
There was
Jonesy, make sure that it'll
just this
upload.
last thing I'll say is,
Yeah.
God, what is going on here? My
Siri's back.
computer is going nuts.
Siri.
I'm sorry.
Fuck off, Siri.
It's no, shh. No, they had. You've heard of Scientology, right?
Yeah.
And so there was years ago, the Los Angeles Times ran a series of articles exposing all the worst things about it. It's just a gruesome reading. And what Scientology did is they took snippets, like half a sentence, that seemed to be saying great things about the company, and they had giant billboards all over Los Angeles with these half sentences that seemed to be saying how amazing Scientology was, and then underneath LA Times. And so, that was kind of brilliant, kind of diabolic, brilliant advertising. So I'm not comparing what you're doing there to that.
Yeah.
Not at all, but anyway.